there is something you were never told. It's not in school books, nor in the speeches of great leaders. You won't see it in headlines or universities, but it has always been there, hidden among symbols, forgotten gestures, and inherited silences. Since the most ancient times, a force has been revered, feared, and carefully guarded by the initiates of all great spiritual traditions. An energy so powerful that when truly understood, it could reverse illnesses, change a man's destiny, and even lift the veils of reality. Today, this force is mocked, ridiculed, or simply ignored. We're talking about celibacy, but not the forced, moralistic, or religious abstinence the modern world associates with the word. No, we're speaking of a forgotten art, an ancient knowledge that transcends the body and touches the invisible. Imagine for a moment that within you dwells a fire that is born with you, but that is almost always wasted, scattered, unconsciously given away to the world. This fire, which in ancient scriptures was called prana, Kundalini, Pneuma, or life force, is the seed of your highest power. And every time it is cast away carelessly, something in you is lost, not physically but energetically. What the great masters knew, and what they don't want you to know, is that this energy can be retained, transmuted, and used as a catalyst for your inner ascension. And that is the secret. Celibacy is not a renunciation, but an invocation. It is not absence, it is presence. It is not repression, it is reintegration. In the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, priests underwent long periods of purification before accessing the inner temples. Among the Greeks, initiates in Orphic cults spoke of alchemical chastity as a prerequisite for seeing the inner light. Taoist masters developed breathing techniques, postures, and disciplines to circulate this energy instead of losing it. And among the yogis of India, this force was the foundation of enlightenment. If it was so highly valued throughout history, why is it ridiculed today? The answer may be uncomfortable, but it must be said, a human being who masters their vital energy becomes free. Free from social control, emotional dependence, desire manipulation, and mental fragility. And free people are dangerous to systems that profit from distraction, compulsion, and weakness. That is why we live in an era that encourages instant pleasure, constant gratification, and unrestrained consumption. You are constantly bombarded with stimuli urging you to give your energy to the world without awareness, without direction, without purpose. And each time you do, your inner flame dims a little more. Intuition fades, willpower weakens, presence dissolves. But the path back exists, and it begins with a silent decision to stop giving in, to observe, to return to your center, to protect what is most sacred within you, the seed. When you choose conscious celibacy, the one born from understanding, not obligation, you begin to see subtle changes. Your mind clears, your gaze deepens. Your energy becomes denser, more alive, more magnetic, and the world responds. What once felt like distraction now sounds like noise. What once seduced you now feels fragile. What once was empty now pulses with meaning. It's the first sign that something is changing. This is only the beginning of the journey, but it's enough to change the course of your life. What comes next is not easy, but it is real and powerful. Imagine that everything you seek, clarity, purpose, inner strength, spiritual connection, is already within you, but in a raw, dormant state. Like a precious metal buried beneath layers of distraction, fatigue, and inherited beliefs. That metal is your vital energy. It's there now, pulsing in silence, moving between your thoughts, your instincts, your desires. It gives you energy when you wake up, a spark in your eyes when you meet someone, inspiration in moments of creation. But it's also what gets depleted when you give in to compulsion, excess, or unconscious exhaustion. The ancients knew this. They called it prana. The Taoists called it ding. Christian mystics called it the divine breath. And alchemists simply called it the inner fire. Different names, same principle, an energy that is not only biological but spiritual. A bridge between body and soul, between instinct and enlightenment. But in the modern world, this fire is treated like waste, a biological byproduct, something to be spent, consumed, released, as if nothing precious was lost in the process, when in fact something extremely valuable is lost. Modern science is slowly beginning to confirm what the ancient masters already knew thousands of years ago. Studies show that retaining sexual energy positively affects levels of dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and even cognitive clarity. Neuroscience now admits that compulsive behaviors, such as excessive consumption of pornography, can atrophy areas of the brain responsible for motivation, focus, and emotional connection. It's not just a moral issue. It's neurological, it's spiritual. When you retain your vital energy, not out of guilt or dogma, but out of awareness, something within you begins to reorganize. It's as if your body says, "Finally, you've come home." Your gaze sharpens, your voice steadies, your thoughts become calmer, yet more powerful. You begin to take up space with greater presence. That energy which was once wasted now begins to accumulate. And where there is accumulation, there is density, magnetism, will. The retained life force begins to rise. First, it purifies the body, bringing more vitality and health. Then it touches the mind, expanding perception. And finally, if properly guided, it awakens the spirit. And here lies the most overlooked secret of modern society. This energy has direction. It rises if you retain it but don't channel it. It accumulates without purpose and can lead to restlessness, anxiety, and confusion. That's why the ancients combined retention with spiritual practice. They breathed, meditated, walked, created, prayed, not to escape the world, but to give shape to the energy they were cultivating. Because without direction, even the purest fire can burn. But with direction, it illuminates. In alchemy, this is called transmutation. In Taoism, internal circulation. In the Vedas, the rise of Kundalini. In all cases, the same principle applies. Retention alone is not enough. It must be transformed. When you understand this, celibacy stops being just a struggle. It becomes a channel, a practice, an art. You stop resisting your impulses and begin to understand them. You stop seeing your energy as a burden and start treating it as a gift. And the most curious part is, the world notices. People can't explain it, but they feel it. Your presence changes the room. Your voice carries a deeper vibration. You begin to attract not by appearance, but by essence, because something within you has stopped scattering. That is rare, and what is rare is valuable. That's what they don't want you to know. They don't profit from your strength. Self-mastery is a revolution. In a time when everything calls you outward, turning inward is an act of power. And in an age where the body is treated as a product, caring for your energy as a temple is a return to the sacred. And all of this begins with a simple gesture: to choose to retain, to choose to transmute, to choose to elevate. Pause for a moment and observe how many times a day you feel an impulse. A tap to check your phone, a craving for sugar, a video that captures your attention without you knowing why, a piece of content that provokes, excites, stimulates. This is not a coincidence. We live in an era of engineered stimuli, carefully calibrated to activate the most primitive part of your brain. The reward system, the same system that drives you to seek immediate pleasure without considering the cost. And the more you respond to these stimuli, the stronger it becomes, like a muscle of impulsiveness growing silently. This is where your vital energy begins to leak, not through major decisions, but through small, constant leaks. And the more your body gets used to seeking instant gratification, the less it can tolerate silence, discipline, and direction. This is the invisible addiction of our time. Science has already proven that constant dopamine stimulation, such as that from excessive use of pornography, social media, and junk food, dulls your natural sensitivity, making everything feel more bland, more boring. Your motivation fades, your vitality cools, your spiritual connection gets lost in the noise. Now ask yourself, what does this have to do with your vital energy? Everything. When the body is trained to respond to every small impulse with immediate gratification, it forgets how to conserve, how to hold, how to transform. It wants to release, quickly, always. And that's exactly what the system wants. A person who doesn't know how to master their impulses is someone who consumes more, is distracted more, questions less, and depends more. That's why retaining your vital energy is almost an act of resistance, a break in the pattern, a code you are rewriting in your own body. But don't be fooled. The addicted body doesn't surrender without a fight. In the first days you decide to retain, you will experience symptoms, restlessness, vivid dreams, anxiety, mood swings. Your body, used to easy relief, will crave the old reward. But this is the turning point. If you get through this phase, something changes. Your nervous system reorganizes. Your energy begins to concentrate. You start to notice subtle things, the impact of your choices, the root of your desires, how your body responds to invisible stimuli. And for the first time, you feel that you're in control. But how do you win this silent battle? Here are 3 simple, real practices you can start today. Create small gaps between impulse and action. Felt like opening Instagram? Wait 5 minutes. Feel the discomfort. Observe the origin. This small pause starts to weaken the automatic loop and strengthens your awareness. Redirect the energy through the body. Every time desire arises, move. Take a deep breath, walk, climb stairs, do push-ups. Teach your body that there is another way to circulate that was energy, not by repressing it, but by not surrendering either. Choose a purpose to channel your energy. Without direction, retention becomes tension. But with purpose, it becomes fuel. Write, create, study, practice. Every time you feel the urge to waste energy, channel it into building yourself. These practices are simple but not easy. They require consistency, presence, and above all, the will to be free. And you don't need to do this for 10 years. 7 days are enough to feel the first effects. 21 to notice a shift in patterns. And 90 to build a new foundation. This isn't magic, it's physiology. And it's also spirituality. Because the body is the temple, and a temple without governance cannot hold the sacred. So look inward with courage. Observe your patterns. See where your energy is leaking. See what your body has learned and teach it a new way. And what if I told you the path you've started now has already been walked by some of the greatest masters in human history? People who went beyond ordinary existence, who left timeless legacies, and whose names still echo through the ages, not because of external power, but because of inner mastery. Modern science calls it self-control. Religions call it purity. The initiates, however, have always known this is alchemical power. They knew something that most have forgotten or never had access to. From ancient Egypt, through the mountains of China and the temples of India, to Christian hermits and desert monks, one truth was whispered, passed from mouth to mouth among the initiated. Vital energy is the raw material of enlightenment, the hidden legacy of the initiates. In Egypt, priests were trained from a young age in the practices of silence, breathing, and restraint. Before entering the inner chambers of the temples, they underwent cycles of purification, during which sexual energy was safeguarded like spiritual gold. It was called K, the subtle force that connected man to the gods. In India, yogis did more than meditate, they transmuted. Celibacy was known as brahmacharya, not as repression but as channeling. When redirected, this force activated energy centers, chakras, and elevated consciousness to the state of samadhi, the spiritual ecstasy. They did not see the body as an enemy, but as an instrument of ascension. In ancient China, Taoist masters practiced internal alchemy, where sexual energy, called jing, was circulated along the spine, transformed into life force energy, qi, and later into spiritual energy, shen. They claimed this practice slowed aging, cured diseases, and led to spiritual immortality. In Christian tradition, desert monks from Egypt and Syria spoke of chastity of the heart as the path to clear vision. Saint Jerome said that one who mastered his impulses was more powerful than a warrior who conquered cities. These weren't just beliefs, they were spiritual technologies. But something changed. Modernity, with its rush, its need for fast results and endless consumption, discredited these practices, turned wisdom into taboo, and what was once sacred became a joke. So what did the masters do that you can apply? You don't need to live isolated in a cave to access this power, but you can learn from them by integrating real practices into your daily life. Redirect desire. When energy rises, the masters didn't suppress it. They listened to it, felt where it wanted to go, and then elevated it. This energy can become focus, creativity, art, devotion. Desire is sacred. What changes is the destination you give it. Breath as a bridge. Almost all ancient masters used breath as a tool for transmutation. Inhale deeply, hold it. Imagine the energy rising up the spine. Inhale with intention. Do this for 5 minutes upon waking and before sleeping. The practice transforms. Purpose as direction. The masters never stored energy for ego. They served something greater: art, silence, the people, the divine. And you, where is your energy being channeled? Without purpose, retained energy becomes anxiety. With purpose, it becomes fulfillment. Silence as an ally. Great transformations don't shout, they whisper. Find 10 minutes a day for silence. Not to think, but to listen. The mind settles, the body stabilizes, and the spirit strengthens. What changes in you? When you embody these habits, something quiet yet profound happens. Your gaze changes. Your voice gains strength. Your presence deepens. People perceive you differently. You perceive yourself differently because your energy is returning to your center. And more importantly, you align yourself with an invisible lineage. Those who chose the harder path, but also the most real. You stop being a victim of the current and begin to be a source, a presence, a silent influence. And it's at that point that everything begins to make sense. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. And that strength is not aggressive. It is serene. It is silent. It is magnetic. For a long time, celibacy was seen only as a moral or religious concept. It was something reserved for monks, priests, or hermits, and regarded as a form of renunciation. But as the world transforms and science expands its frontiers, something curious is beginning to happen. Modern studies from neuroscience, biology, and psychology are starting, even if timidly, to touch upon truths the ancient masters have known for millennia. And it all begins with one simple question: what happens in the body and mind of someone who retains their vital energy? The answer, though still timid in universities, is already echoing in laboratories around the world. In studies with Tibetan monks, for example, researchers identified significant changes in brain waves, especially during deep meditative states associated with abstinence and inner focus. The brain literally begins to operate at a different frequency, more coherent, more synchronized, more lucid. But it's not just the brain. When someone practices conscious celibacy, the body doesn't go into deficiency. As many people assume, it goes into transformation. The retention of sexual energy, instead of being an act of denial, activates subtle endocrine processes, leading to hormonal regulation, increased testosterone in men, and greater hormonal balance in women. According to observational studies, this can result in greater focus, vitality, and even improved physical and mental readiness for high-performance activities. That alone would be impressive. But something deeper is happening behind these findings. Science is beginning to understand that energy is not just a metaphor. Quantum physics has already taught us that everything is energy, thoughts, emotions, intentions. Everything vibrates at a specific frequency. And when we speak of sexual energy, we are dealing with the most intense creative force we have. It's the only energy capable of generating a new life. If it can create a human being, what else could it create if redirected? This is where the concept of transmutation, so present in alchemical traditions, begins to dialogue with contemporary science. Some neuroscientists are already studying how the direction of libido, it can alter not only dopamine production but also behavior, mental clarity, and a person's sense of purpose. In other words, you begin to shift from being reactive to becoming a creator. Imagine a candle that used to be lit and quickly consumed. Now that flame is preserved, fed from within. It warms the body, illuminates the mind, and expands perception. Gradually, What once seemed impossible, like maintaining focus, making wise decisions, or entering deep states of presence, begins to feel natural. And all of this aligns with a new generation of scientists and therapists who advocate for nervous system regulation as a key to well-being. And guess what one of the main triggers of dysregulation is? The uncontrolled use of sexual energy. Pornography addiction, for example, has already been recognized by numerous research centers as a cause of reduced productivity, loss of natural pleasure, and distorted emotional bonding with others. But here's an important detail. Science moves slowly because it requires evidence. Ancient traditions, on the other hand, without microscopes, operated through a different lens, internal observation. And the accounts are countless of masters who expanded their perception, accessed lucid dreams, felt the awakening of serpent energy, opened the subtle body's channels, and connected with something greater. And this is where you come in. Because even with everything science can prove, the greatest laboratory is still your body. The strongest evidence is what you feel when you decide to stop giving your energy away to empty impulses. When you realize that silence is worth more than stimulation, that the strength you feel when you retain, breathe, and transform is real and doesn't need an academic article to exist. Maybe science will take time to fully acknowledge all of this. But your energetic field already has. Your body already knows. Your soul is already responding. And that is the greatest validation you can have. You don't need to wait for the world to say it works. There comes a moment on the journey when everything seems to fall apart. You begin with motivation, feeling the effects of energy retention, more focus, more presence, more personal power. But then, like a silent wave, the invisible challenge arises, unexplained anxiety, powerful returning impulses, doubt whispering in your mind. This moment has a name, the dark night of the soul. And although it feels like a fall, it is in truth a test. When you decide to walk away from the dominant pattern, consumption, immediate gratification, the easy release of your energy, the nervous system, still wired to old connections, goes on alert. It wants to return to the familiar, even if the familiar is pain, distraction, and emptiness. This is where true mastery begins, not over the world, but over yourself. Spiritual traditions have always known this. Buddha faced his own demons before attaining enlightenment. Christian monks spoke of the inner sins that arise in silence. Taoist masters warned of the hidden dragon that appears when vital energy begins to accumulate. It is the confrontation with the conditioned self, the part that seeks escape, the part that fears real power, and it's not easy. In this phase, sexual impulses may feel stronger than ever. Old habits come knocking with subtle disguises, a memory, an image, a stray thought slipping in. The outer world seems to test you, but here's the secret. This is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of progress. You are touching the roots of your programming. The energy that was once wasted is, for the first time, trying to rise, to circulate, to awaken dormant centers in your body and consciousness. But for that to happen, you must pass through the turbulence. And you don't do that by fighting. You do it by observing, breathe. At this point in the journey, simple practices become powerful. Daily meditation, even for 10 minutes, helps stabilize the mind that seeks escape. Conscious breathing, with focus on the spine and lower abdomen, helps move the accumulated energy. Intuitive writing, either upon waking or before sleep, can reveal hidden thoughts trying to sabotage you. And above all, do not judge yourself. The journey of transmutation is not a straight line. It is a spiral. And every spiral that completes brings you to a new level of clarity and power. Science has already shown that the brain is plastic. It reorganizes itself through repetition and intention. So each day that you choose to retain your energy, to focus, to walk, to breathe, even if you stumble along the way, you are sculpting a new inner structure, a stronger, more stable, more conscious identity. This identity is the one that doesn't react. It chooses. It doesn't hide. It looks within. It doesn't beg for pleasure. It overflows with presence. And when this version begins to consolidate, the world around you responds. Relationships shift, your gaze deepens. Time seems to slow down. Intuition strengthens. You feel in your body that something has awakened. And even in the face of difficulty, you no longer wish to return to who you once were. This is where you begin to live, not as a repeater of patterns, but as an alchemist of your own being, not as another person lost in distraction, but as someone who walks with purpose even through darkness, because you carry your own torch. And if you've made it this far, know this: you are ready. Ready to sustain this energy, ready to inspire others with your presence, ready to live as someone who is not defined by what they consume, but by what they transform. This is the art of true celibacy, not to repress, but to redirect, not to deny, but to integrate, not to extinguish the fire, but to turn it into light. If this content touched you in any way, if it brought you clarity, strength, or a silent urge to continue on this path, I want to invite you. Subscribe to the channel now. Here we go beyond the surface. We explore ancient knowledge, reveal the hidden, and offer practical pathways for you to become the master of yourself. Every week, new reflections, new discoveries, and more pieces of the puzzle are revealed. You are not alone. We're in this together, in this search for meaning, for truth, for inner power.